All right, so a new episode of Once Upon a Boot. I have Pete on the show here today. Stand-up comic, Army vet. What's going on, Pete?
Not too much. How's it going? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to see you. So do you want to give the audience a little bit about yourself, a little background?
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up in Wisconsin, real small town. Ended up joining the Army. I was 22. I tried to join out of high school, but had like a sinus surgery, so they had made me wait 4 years. But then ended up joining the Army as a 18 X-ray, got 41 clubbed at airborne school, ended up in the infantry world, and spent most of my time just playing practical jokes. I was like, I just didn't have like the killer instinct or like like I don't like conflict. Like I think part of why I joined was because I like felt my recruiter would be disappointed if I said no. So I just went and took like the most conflict central job and did practical jokes. And now I'm living in New York City. Work as a stand-up comic and in cybersecurity. So things are pretty good.
Nice. And I want to get into more of what you're doing now, but let's go back a little bit to the beginning. So you said you joined the Army. You had to like hold off on that. Why did you want to join the Army in the first place?
So there were a few reasons. Like the biggest one was the first day of my senior year of high school was 9/11.
Oh, okay.
So at that point, like I didn't really have a direction. I was thinking about like applying to some colleges and things like that. But when that happened, I'm like, oh, this is more important. So
yeah,
I kind of figured that would be. And I had a couple relatives in the Army. Like both of my mom's parents were in the Army. My dad's dad was a Marine in World War I or World War II. So there's a little bit of that, but we weren't like a military family.
Yeah. I kind of the same thing here. I mean, when you go to join, did you know what you wanted to do, or were you like, I'll take the ASVAB, see like what's available, or did you like, I'm gonna join the Army, I'm gonna do this?
So I was actually trying to go intelligence, and then I took the ASVAB and I scored really well on the ASVAB, but at the time where I was able to like my ship window, there weren't very many jobs available, so it was like cook, plumber, scuba diver, or special forces. And like I'm like, I don't, and I'm like, maybe scuba diver sounds fun because I'm like a good swimmer. And then they're like, well, if you go special forces, you get to go to scuba school. And I'm like, sign me up. And so that was pretty. Looking back, it's hilarious that because I was also fat then. Like I don't know what my.
Oh, yeah, that's great. I mean, they try to, I know like for the Navy, they try to push special forces and nuke. Like those are the two things that they really try to push when you join. So that, I mean, it was probably the same for the Army, I would assume, that like they really want people for that field and they'll just send as many people off.
Definitely. I actually originally was going to join the Navy and I tested into the nuke program. And so they were super excited. And then when I took my shirt off at MEPS, they're like, "Oh, is that a tattoo below the sleeve, or below the elbow?" I'm like, "It is." And they're like, "Well, we can't have you." I'm like, "But you have tattoos below the elbow." It's like I got these after I was in.
The same thing. So you joined in '06, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I joined I first went to like the recruiter in 2011, but even then, so I had my bachelor's degree already. I tried to go officer, but because I had tattoos below the elbow, they just said no. Yeah, I was like, even with the degree, they're like, yep, no, you'll go enlisted, and you can get like automatic E3 out of boot camp, but you're not going to be an officer.
That's
like, okay.
That's the same. Like Popeye has tattoos below the elbow, and he's their guy.
And now you can have tattoos pretty much like fucking anywhere in the military, and no one cares.
Yeah,
so.
it was crazy, but like, I like the Navy recruiters. I liked his pitch because, like. I think like most small town recruiting depots, it was like you have like Main Street and then there's like each branch has like one office in the same.
Of course.
So the Air Force guy was never there because he would meet his quota on like day one and he would just like stack people like 6 deep.
Yeah.
And so he had the easiest job in the military. And so I couldn't even like see him. So then I'm like, okay, I'll try the Navy. Like that sounds good. Like I feel like I have better options after military service, like, you know, if I learn a skill. And then like the Navy guy, like I walk in and he's like, I got a question for you. And I should preface this. Like, I went to the Marine guy because he was, like, very aggressive. And
I did too.
he was trying that whole thing. He's like, you're not good enough for my Corps. Like, trying to make me want it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, no. I read the book by mystery. You're just negging me. Like, I don't need that.
Yeah.
But then, like, the Navy guy is like, hey, question for you. I'm like, am I good enough for the Navy? He's like, no, I don't care about that. That guy's insane. He's like, do you like to party? He's like, that's not a cruiser, that's not a carrier, that's a Steel Beach, baby. And then he just showed me like pictures of like the Steel Beach picnics. He's like,
what a salesman.
yeah, he was. It was great. And then they found out about the tattoos, and so then the Army was like, got the rose by default.
Yeah. Yeah, a similar thing happened to me. Like, the Marine recruiter called me in, and then kind of I took my jacket off, and he's like, okay, never mind, get out. And then the Navy was taking me, but I had to get waivers for all my tattoos. And eventually my recruiter was like, I might just send you over to the Army because I don't want to do waivers anymore. I was like, if I wanted to join the Army, I would have just joined the Army.
Yeah.
I came to this office. So eventually we kind of got it going, but I mean, I had no idea what I wanted to do, kind of like you. They just threw things at me and I took it. So
Exactly.
Yeah. So you join, you get to boot camp. Did you have an idea of what boot camp was going to be like? Because in my head, I was like, oh, it's going to be like Full Metal Jacket, and I'm going to get to boot camp, and that's what it is. But it's not that serious, right?
Yeah, it was weird because I watched Full Metal Jacket. Like, I just watched the first half of Full Metal Jacket. Like, even to this
I think everybody does.
Like,
and then the movie is weird.
Yeah, I never like watched the part where they're in Vietnam, but like I watched that a couple times to prepare.
Yeah.
And it was kind of funny, like how not serious. Like the whole thing was like insane because these people are like trying to roast you.
Yeah.
But they're terrible comics. Like, they're not funny at all.
The fact that some of them that they don't break too.
Yeah.
Because like you're too scared to laugh, but how are they not laughing knowing that it's all just like an act?
Yeah, that was like the part. And then I got caught like doing impressions of all of them like in the bay. And like that was pretty fun. Like, because after a while, like I think like did you have like red phase and blue phase and
So Navy boot camp's kind of weird. So are you talking now? When you say that, are you saying like the people in charge of you, or?
So it's for the Army. It was because I went to one station like infantry training, so like the OSET.
Yep.
So that was like 16 weeks, and it was the same. It was the same cadre for the entire 16 weeks.
Okay.
But like there were phases. So like the first like 4 weeks were red phase, and that was where you had like no freedom and everything was like really intense. And then like you got slightly more humane treatment like as things went
I get what you're saying. So for us, the first I think 2 weeks of Navy boot camp is called P days, which is just, it stands for processing days. It's all like they're really mean to you. You're like doing all the basic stuff, but they're not allowed to do anything physical with you yet. And then after that 2 weeks, which is when you get like all your medical shit done, and then they find out like, oh, we can like beat the shit out of these people. Now like the next 4 weeks is like really intense, and then the last 2 weeks they kind of ease up a little bit until graduation, and then the last few days it's almost like, buddy.
Yeah, it's like the last day of school where they're like being like, okay, like you got your orders, you're going to Fort Hood, like look for this guy, he'll set you straight.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, it was. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, did you ever pick up any like material or anything from the things that they said in boot camp at all, or?
A little bit. Like my favorite was we had a couple people that like were all like good human beings, but just not military material. And so every once in a while, like there was this one guy where they would like make him like go into the wood line, and like there were always the rumors of like, oh, if you go into the wood line, they're gonna beat the shit out of you. But instead, like they would just make him like walk up to trees and apologize for wasting the oxygen that they provided.
Oh fuck, that's pretty good.
So like that one was pretty good, and then they would let us like probably like I think this is like the moment where I knew I was like in with them, and I'm like, okay, like they like me, like I'll be fine throughout this. Was they would make us I guess it's like the Stanford prison experiment, but they would make us like deal out mass punishment to our platoon and like smoke everybody.
Yeah.
And so then like it was my turn to do that, and I had everybody like reenacting the Battle of Hoth. So there were like people like duck walking to be like the AT-ATs or bear
That's
crawling.
great.
And then there was like the X-wings with like the push-ups, and everybody was doing like a different exercise. And then like the drill sergeants were like, okay, first of all, this is kind of incredible, but like two, like X-wings weren't on Hoth. Like, what the hell are you doing? That should be an A-wing with a tow cable. Like, I couldn't think of an A-wing. He's like, improvise. And like, so then like they were getting smoked longer because we were trying to make it like accurate to the movie.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, we had in Army boot camp. Did anybody ever get sent back in training for any reasons? Did you ever get anybody like that?
We had a couple people that like came into our cycle like that, but I don't think that, except for maybe like one or two injuries.
So we had one person who got sent back to us, and his drill instructor would come and visit our compartment every night just to fuck us up because his guy got sent back to our division. And he used to call himself like this. I used to think it was so funny. He would come into the space. He was like this big, jacked up dude. And he'd be like, they call me John the Baptist because I send recruits to bed wet. And he would sing like gospel music while he was like making us do push-ups until we like threw up.
That's amazing.
So he'd like walk up to you, he'd be like, take me to the water. And he like everybody's like drenched and dripping. And then when he was done, he'd be like, John the Baptist, out. And he'd just leave. But like that dude was fucking. He was pretty funny.
That is amazing. Like I liked when they would have like the gimmicks, like the old school wrestlers.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we had another one. Like there was this kid who was like he was a scientist in his civilian life.
Oh wow.
And he was like a National Guard guy. And so they were doing the thing where they're like, we're gonna go ahead and like what did they call it? They were like, we're gonna turn this into a steam room where like everybody would be sweating so much. And it's like scientists get like we're getting like smoked for like an hour and like nothing's happening. And like finally this kid's like it's too cold outside or it's too warm outside for this to happen. And they're like, what are you talking about? It's like we're not going to get the dew point above like because it's 71 degrees outside right now. And like they were just kind of amazed that like this kid like while doing push-ups did the math to figure out like how high they would need to bring the temperature up. It's like we're not going to make it.
It's great. I love like the cast of characters you have in boot camp between like the drill instructors and the people. Like you have so many. It's just like a melting pot of just like crazy amounts of people. And like I met some of the funniest people, some of like the shittiest people. There was like one kid in our division who during the physical fitness test he pooped his pants while he was running, but he still finished the test.
Well, good for him.
Which was disgusting because it was like falling out of his shorts. But like you see some funny things in boot camp.
Yeah, you really do. Like we would do like the buffer rodeo.
Oh, what's that?
Like we had the floor buffer,
Oh,
and you would like plug it in, and then like if you sat on top of it, you could like ride it as it spun, and you were supposed to see like who could like get the cord to wrap around the highest. And we had a couple people that like could do it until it like pulled the cord out of the wall, which is pretty amazing.
Those are great. That's great games.
There were some fun ones.
So when you graduate boot camp, now do you stay in the general vicinity that you were in boot camp for your next like course of training, or do you get sent somewhere else?
So I originally like because typically like when you finish like basic training for infantry, because you don't have to go to AIT or anything like that because it's built in. You typically go right to your duty station. Because I had the Special Forces contract, was I was going to be going to airborne school, so I was going to stay at Fort Benning for like another 2-3 weeks until airborne school, and then from there I was going to go to it should have been Fort Bragg to start like the Q course and stuff like that.
Okay.
But I got 41 clubbed, so I ended up getting shipped to Texas.
So the special forces for the army, what is that's made up of a bunch of different roles, right? It's like Rangers, Green Berets, like what makes up special forces?
So the Rangers and like the Rangers and the Green Berets are two different. Like when you say special forces, like that typically just refers to the Green Berets.
Okay.
And then like in there, you're gonna have a bunch of different like branches and stuff like that. And then
Got it.
usually each team is gonna have one engineer, one communications guy, one like weapons expert, and one medic.
Okay.
And then the Rangers are like kind of their own thing. They're just more like an advanced unit. So
they're kind of like the SEALs for the Navy.
yeah, kind of like it's like the Rangers do a lot of extraction stuff. Like they're definitely like way more high speed than like the normal infantry units.
Yeah.
And then like the special forces, like their stated mission at least is to be like to go abroad and then like train basically insurgent forces and like
Got it.
teach people how to like basically like teaching the Afghans how to fight the Russians, and then like that didn't backfire at all.
Yeah. So you get sent over to, you said Texas, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you're in Texas. How long are you in Texas for this training?
Well, when I got to Texas, I was at my first duty station. So,
Okay.
like after the 41 Club, like, and the 41 Club, like, if you're not familiar, is they overbook airborne school like a lot, and so
Interesting.
and it's kind of like a known thing. So if there's 200 spots available for this class of airborne school, they might have 300 people trying to fill those spots, and then you have to do your PT tests and stuff like that.
Is that because people fail out, or?
So it could be for a bunch of different reasons. Like one, like airborne school is like one of the most in-demand schools, so they always have. There's never a shortage of people like looking to fill a seat.
Okay.
And then also, like during the summer and spring, because I graduated in April of 2007.
Okay.
So the April or March of 2007. So at this point, like some of the ROTC people are sending their students down because like they've got like spring break and are about to like have everybody like doing like the summer training and stuff like that.
Got it.
Other countries like also like I think at the time like Ghana or Colombia sent a bunch of their like officers to get American airborne training.
Interesting.
But the problem is like when they do that, like there's still only the X amount of spots. So they have everybody do the push-up test or like the PT test. But once those spots are filled, like that's it. And so they can't say that they overbooked. So what they do is they 41 club it, which is like you need 42 push-ups to pass the PT test. And after, spot 200 has been filled, that it's like when you're doing your push-ups, like I think I did like 60 something, and they just kept going 41, 41, 41, and that was like your clue that you were not going to make it into the next thing because the spots had been full.
Interesting. That's kind of fucked up.
It's super fucked up because it changed like my whole career trajectory. Like I went from like once that happened, like I couldn't complete my special forces contract, and I went like needs of the Army for infantry.
Oh shit. So wow, that's wild.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I was pretty pissed about it, and then that affected my bonus too because they're like, well, you've filled out a bonus for this, and now you're not doing that. So
of no fault of your own either. It's just like
exactly.
Oh shit. See, like I know special forces for the Navy, if you fail out, they'll re-rate you to something else based off like your ASVAB. But I know like for the nuke program, for example, like let's say you fail out of nuke school and you were a machinist mate like in the nuke program, they'd be like, okay, well now you're just a regular machinist mate or something like that.
Okay,
I know
yeah,
that they do things like that.
That would make sense. Like they would say like needs of the Army, so technically you could go to other stuff, but the infantry was always what had the needs.
Yeah. Plus, in the mid 2000s, they needed people to go overseas and stuff, I would assume.
Exactly. So, this was like right at the start of the surge.
Yeah. Okay, so you get basically sent infantry then after that. Do you get deployed like right away? Is it like a cooldown period? Like what happens with that?
So I know that there were some of the people I went to that I graduated basic with, like they deployed within like 2 weeks. Like they got assigned to a unit that was going. One of them actually was the 173rd out of Italy, and one of the guys that I went to basic with, his dad was the sergeant major of that infantry division.
Oh, no shit.
And so he was able to like pull the strings and be like, okay, well, I want Tim to be with me. And I feel terrible because he ended up like getting killed in action like a month after we graduated.
Shit. Jesus.
So like I can't imagine like the guilt that his dad must feel a little bit, but
Oh wow.
but for us, like my unit was like, it was supposed to stand up in like I think the next year, but because of the surge, they're like, okay, well you have to stand up now, and Fort Knox wasn't ready for us, so they sent us to Fort Hood because they had basically just extra space, and then we trained for probably about a year. So we because our unit had to start up from scratch, and when I got there, like I think our company only had like 25 people, and it's supposed to have 150.
Yeah.
And then from there we built up and deployed in June, but I think I also got there in like May or June of the year before.
Oh wow. Okay. So when you get deployed for the first time, is that to like Afghanistan, Iraq? Where do you end up going?
This was to Afghanistan. So
Afghanistan.
We flew like from Texas to Manas Air Force Base in Kyrgyzstan.
Okay.
And then like waited there for like a week or two. Yeah, right around a week or so, and then flew into Kandahar.
So what is your mindset going into your first deployment? I know like how I had a wife, kid, so my first deployment was it was a lot different than what I imagined it would be like. And plus, like I'm obviously deploying on a ship. You're going boots on the ground to Afghanistan. So like what's going through your mind? Are you excited? Are you scared? Are you like just ready to get over there? What's going on?
So there were a few things. Like I remember being like weirdly relieved that I was going to Afghanistan instead of Iraq.
Okay.
Partly because I think part of that was because at the time like things were like really picking up in Iraq.
Yeah.
Like because that was like I think around the time of like the Battle of Fallujah and Mosul and things like that, and so I was like, okay, like things aren't as intense here, and also like there was like a weird feeling where I felt like we were way more justified to be in Afghanistan than in Iraq. I'm just like, okay, like at least this is like what I signed up for. I would feel like a little worse if I like joined and was like, like because I wasn't like super supportive of like us being in Iraq in the first place. Yeah. And so I felt like a little better with that. But then, I was definitely like nervous and scared and stuff like that because they do all the things too to like make you like to make you feel like extra scared. Like we did like the combat landing where like we were like just straight down, lights out to get into Kandahar. And like oddly enough, like on our flight from Manas to Kandahar, like Dave Attell and Artie Lang were like doing a USO show, and so they were like flying with us.
No shit. That must have been cool, right?
It was pretty cool, and I'm like, this is really weird. Like because like also like my thought is like if this plane goes down, like the story's going to be about like Dave Attell and Artie Lang getting killed.
Yeah, not about you or anybody else that's on.
But it was cool. Like they did a really cool show, and that was like one of the reasons I got into stand up later. But
no shit. All right, so you land over there. Now, when you first see that terrain, like I had previously had somebody on that talked about when they first went over there, just like the shock of how almost like desolate everything is, which is kind of like a wild thing to see. And like same thing with me when I went to, Bahrain or other places in the UAE. It's like a booming city and then just nothingness forever. Yeah, essentially. It's kind of like a wild sight.
It's insane, like because it feels like it's a different. It feels like a different planet. Like
it does, yeah.
Like it had like major Star Wars vibes, like, and also like because it's like okay, like you see a desert, you're like okay, this is gonna be like regular sand. Like I've been to the beach, but
it's
this like
completely different. Yeah,
and I'm like wow, this is like that's really crazy, and then like but you would see like where the water was, and there would be like these like oases, just like very like looked like the Garden of Eden. Like just way off in the distance, but everything else is just like brown and desolate, and like especially my first deployment it was like all desert, so like you would have like some mountains in the distance, but it was really like just it looked like Mars does now, like when I see that.
So when you're on deployment, how long does your first deployment last for?
So our first one was a year.
Okay. Oh wow. So you were over there for a year straight.
Yes, like I had like
Okay.
2 weeks of R&R, but that was about it.
So I always like to talk on the show about, when movies portray a deployment, any type of military movie, doesn't matter the branch, it's always like action, 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 action the whole time, right? But we know that a deployment, it's like maybe like 5% action, and then the rest of it is just sitting around, bullshitting, doing nothing, trying not to go crazy because you're gone for so long. So is this when you started to kind of like get your comedy stuff going, when you're just like bored killing time, or?
Yeah, I think that was like definitely part of it because like the first deployment was so much quieter than the second one. Like the first one, I was not expecting because I think we only got into like one or two firefights.
Yeah.
We would find IEDs like all the time. We were like right in IED alley and stuff like that. And there were a couple like engagements and stuff like that. But like there were like few enough for me to remember each of them.
Yeah.
So it's like okay, like that happened. But yeah, like that's kind of how I started. Like we would be like hanging out because we took this like really really small base that was like the Afghan National Police. They had moved out, and so we converted it into something for our company. And then we would just like there was nothing there. Like we didn't have an MWR tent yet. Like we didn't even have buildings at the time.
Oh wow.
Like we were like sleeping under parachutes and stuff like that.
Oh shit.
On like cots. And so then there was like a garbage fire, and I would just like tell stories and jokes around that. And then like people like started really like having a good like they would make requests.
Yeah.
And then from there I'm like, okay, like I can do this. And then it kind of like became a thing. Like it turned into like a cigar club where like I would like just be like smoking and joking and stuff like that. And then like after enough people like started to like really like request it and stuff like that, it just kind of grew from there. And so then I would like start adding things or like try like writing jokes because for the most part at first I was just telling like funny stories from like growing up and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we always, very similar type stuff. On my second ship that I was on, we had somebody in my division who was a magician, and he used to like do things like that to kind of entertain everybody and play jokes and stuff like that as like a magician. But you kind of get these people that kind of fit into different roles within your like platoon or division that you're in. Like, so you were obviously like the funny guy, I would assume, in the group. What were some of the other personalities that you had with you?
Oh man, so there were my first unit like was all really good people. There were a lot of really funny people. Not really as many like performative, but we had like a couple we had a couple really talented musicians. So they would like be bringing out the guitars at night and stuff like that. We had I'm trying to think of some of the other big personalities. Like there were a lot of people just like super obsessed with being like high speed and like.
Yeah.
And so there were like the people like constantly like spray painting their gear and stuff like that. And like always trying to like, which like I totally get, like I understand. And like there was like the weirdo that would like sit out and like sharpen his knife every night, and I'm like,
of course,
like you're opening MREs with that thing.
Oh fuck. Yeah, we got them. We always called them like the Joe Navy people, like that are just like so like hoo-yah about everything. And I'm like, I mean, it's not that serious. We're really not doing anything out here.
Yeah.
We're just floating on the water. Yeah, but you're out there. You're dealing with all this stuff. I mean, what were like some of your favorite things to do to kill time besides like getting into comedy? Like what were your go-to things for deployment to kind of keep yourself sane?
So some of it was like weightlifting, like because that was
of course.
Like I mean that like I get why people do that in prison now too.
I mean it's just I mean it's a good way to like kill off your anger. It's a good way to kill the time.
Definitely.
It always used to blow my mind that people didn't do it on deployment. I'm like, I mean, what else are you like? We're just sitting. Like you might as well, I mean,
like I wrote a lot of, or like I read a lot of books and stuff like that, and we would have like the series that like everybody was like catching up on together. So it was like book club kind of, but like for like I think at the time like Supernatural was like the big one.
Did you guys have the like hard drive that was full of like movies and TV shows that kind of got passed around to everybody?
Yeah, and like by the end of the deployment, everybody had the same porn.
Of course.
That was
Of course. Yeah, that was always the good thing to track down. Like whenever a new person would come to the ship, like for us on deployment, they met up. I'm like, do you bring a hard drive? Do you have new movies and new TV shows? Because we all had the same shit.
Yeah, that was always the nice part too. When we would go back, we didn't go back to Kandahar very often to like restock. But if we were, we could hit the bazaars and get like
the bootleg DVDs.
Yeah, the bootlegs, and so that was always fun.
Yeah. So you're over there for a year. When it comes time to like come back home, what do you do when you come back?
As far as just like
so you're infantry, right? So
Yeah.
when you come back home, like do you get attached to a base? Are you here for long, or do you come home for like a short period, kind of cool down, and then you get sent right back?
So for us, it was we had a cool down period for a little bit. Like I think they were trying to, at the time, I think they were trying to do like at least 6 months home before going back out. They were shooting for like a year, but that kind of depended. But our unit was extra weird because we weren't supposed to be in Texas ever. We got put there because that was just the base that had room for another like brigade combat team to stand up at the time.
Yeah.
So once we got back, like our barracks were ready at Fort Knox. So I think I was in Texas for like 3 or 4 months, and then like the people that were staying with the unit moved to Fort Knox, and then everybody else either like went to a new duty station, or if they wanted to stay in Texas, because I think some people had the choice, then they would go to like a different Fort Hood unit. So there would be like 1st Cavalry Division or something like that. But I remember actually like the day of the Fort Hood shooting, like was the day after I left. Like if I would have like waited an extra day to out process, like I would have been in the building during the Fort Hood shooting.
No shit.
Like it was pretty scary because there were like people I knew that were like in the building like during the shooting.
Yeah, my first ship had an active shooter on it too, and it was like the day that we had the active shooter, I just so happened to duty swap with somebody else that day. So like if I hadn't done that, I would have been on the ship like when the ship got shot up.
That's crazy.
It's kind of wild like how things like that happen.
Yeah, and it happens a lot. Like there was another, like we had like on our second deployment, like a mission where I probably would have been on the mission and we had like an IED, but I was like on a different base because I had to like get some like medical thing done.
Yeah. So how far into your career are you at this point? Because you said you did like 8 years total, right?
Yeah, I did like 7.5. So at this point, I'm like 2-something years in.
So I would assume you obviously had to re-enlist at some point to do that long. When did you decide that you were going to re-enlist?
I re-enlisted during my first deployment.
Oh wow!
Like somehow they let me, and it was because I could get a bonus. I'm like, oh, this is really cool. I like the unit a lot.
Got it.
And so then I got like it was like the bonuses were like starting to dwindle. So I'm like, okay, if I'm going to do this, then I might as well like get paid, because the next time the retention guy comes around, I'm not gonna be eligible.
Did you have the idea that you wanted to do like a full 20 years, or were you just like, I'll do another like enlistment, see how I like it, or what was your kind of mindset with that?
Yeah, I don't think that I ever thought I was going to do 20, but I definitely did want to see like, okay, like, because at the time too, like I was really only adding, like I did a 6-year re-enlistment, but I was only adding like a year and a half at that point. So I'm like, okay. So like this will get me like pretty close to 8, and then.
So what do? Did you drop like the next 2 years and add 6, like that type of thing?
Yeah, pretty much. So I signed up for a 6-year deployment or a 6-year enlistment right away.
Interesting.
And because that was like the biggest bonus, I'm like, oh, I'll do it for 6 years. Like that's fine.
Yeah.
And then after that, like I was like a year and a half in, and then like I got the option to re-enlist, so they tore up the remaining contract, and I started my 6.
They do the same thing for the Navy. I signed a 6-year, but 2 of those years are schooling. So after 4 years, you can drop your 2-year extension and then re-enlist for 6. So you're really only extending 4 more years.
Okay.
Yeah. So they do a similar thing for us too.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So, all right. So you re-enlist over there. Now, do you get any like ranking bonuses out of that too? Like, where they're like, oh, you get to put on, E4, E5 because of this, or anything like that, or?
I did not. I was at the time like I actually because of the special forces contract, I automatically got promoted to PFC in basic training.
Oh, nice.
So that was a nice perk. So then at that point, I think I was already a specialist.
Oh, nice.
And then I just had to. I was basically waiting my time to be able to go to the E5 board.
Okay, and that's what it is for you guys. It's just like time and rate, and then you go up for a board, and then they determine whether or not you get E5.
Kind of. So there's like a minimum window. Like I think you have to be in at least 18 months. It's either 18 months or 2 years to be eligible to go to the board. And then from there, like you like in order to actually go to the board, though, like your squad leader or somebody has to recommend you for it.
Got it.
And so then like at that point, like you're eligible, but unless somebody like sees the potential in you, like you're not gonna go. But then there's like some jobs are weird, like our fisters, because there were so few fisters.
Yeah.
They once they hit 2 years, like they pinned E5 that day.
Oh, no shit.
They didn't even have to go to a board. They were just automatically promoted because of their job.
Huh. Yeah, I think one of the craziest things I read is that in the Navy, you have like the Navy band, right? I think they get automatic E6.
Yeah, it's disgusting. It's
Which is like wild to even think about. Because I always thought like, okay, well, if one of them like made E6 and then they drop out of that and somehow get sent to a ship, like I'm not fucking listening to this guy. He's never done sea time before.
There's some really, really dumb, like in the Army too, like if there's a horse or a dog, like a military working dog or like one of the parade horses, they are automatically the highest ranking person. So like if you
seriously,
if you have a 4-star like a 4-star general and there's like a military horse, then that horse is technically a 5-star general. And I'm like,
that's wild.
This is so dumb. Like I am not taking orders from a horse.
Oh man. So when you go to your second deployment, are you going back to the same place?
So we did not. We were going back to Afghanistan, but the first one we were in Kandahar district, which is like very deserty, like RC South, and we were right on the border actually of Kandahar, or right near the border at least of Kandahar and Helmand provinces.
Okay.
So it was IED alley and stuff like that, but it was pretty relatively calm, like as far as like just IEDs. And then the second deployment we went to Ghazni. And that was a bit closer to the Pakistani border, a little bit like more in the mountains. And
got it.
That one was like firefights and indirect fire engagements, like for a couple month period, like pretty much every day.
Yeah, I've talked to some people that were kind of like in the mountainous areas over there, and it was same stories. Is that kind of when you were going through all that, you were like, yeah, I'm not going to do this like for longer than this enlistment, or?
Yeah, at that point, I think at that point I was kind of done with it already because I just like I realized that it wasn't like I didn't have like the killer instinct thing, and like there were a lot of things that I just like didn't agree with. So I at that point I was starting to kind of feel that.
Now, did the Army, so in the Navy, when you kind of check out in your head and you're like, this isn't really for me, the Navy kind of just doesn't give a shit about you anymore. They're like, okay, yeah, whatever. Like, we're not going to help you with schools or promotions or whatever. Is the Army kind of similar in that respect? Where once you were like, yeah, maybe this isn't for me, they're like, okay, whatever, like kind of do whatever.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good question because at the time, on my second deployment, I was in E5, and I was like pretty high speed, and they were like talking about like getting me ready for the E6 board when I was like ready for it back stateside.
Yeah. And
then the 11th month of, because at this point I think I had like 3 years left in the Army, and the 11th month of the deployment, there was a I got orders for Hawaii.
Oh.
And yeah, it seemed fun because like I was trying to stay stateside because at this point I was like dating my now wife.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I would like to spend the rest of my time like in New York if possible, like at Fort Drum, and I was like working on like pulling like the very few strings I had to try to like make that happen. And then they're like, well, you have to go overseas. I'm like, I'm overseas right now. I'm in Afghanistan. And they're like, well, it's not good for you. I'm like, I don't really want a career. I'm done. But basically, you have to do overseas tours.
Yeah.
And so it was like, well, you can do Germany, or you can do Hawaii. And I'm like, I guess I'll do Hawaii because then at least like people will visit me. And but then basically, like we had to have 3 years time in service from the day you landed in Hawaii.
Okay.
Which because it's like such a pain to like get to and things like that.
Yep.
And I was only going to have like 2.5 years, or like I think I was going to have 2 years at that point because I only had 3 years left on my contract.
Okay.
And so they're like, well, you have to extend your contract by a year. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to do that. Like, well, you have to because you're going to Hawaii. I'm like, that sounds like a you problem. Like,
Yeah.
we had an agreement. I'm out on this day.
Yeah.
And so then I had to sign this thing called the declination statement or a deck statement. And that was like basically me putting in my like formally signing something that says I am getting out of the Army. Like I refuse to go to this. I refuse to go to this like this post, and I'm not going to like, extend or reenlist. And then from there, like they shit on you. Like at that point, like they're like, well, you're not going to the E6 board anymore. You're not. Like they were trying to keep my my deployment award. They're like, well, like you don't. And it was like an ARCOM. It was like a pretty basic level award. And like, well, you don't get awards because, you know, you're not eligible under the deck statement. And finally the colonel was like, he deployed. He's getting the ARCOM, like, which is like, thanks, I guess. Like it's not like a silver star or anything like that. But, but yeah, basically like they, like no schools, no preferential treatment. Like it's basically just like treat this guy like shit until.
Yeah, that sounds oddly specific to us too. I mean, it and it's kind of the same thing. Like they always tell us to, you know, you got to play the game. You got to make it seem like you're going to stay in, even if you're getting out, because, you know, it's only going to benefit you to do that.
Exactly.
But I was very kind of similar to you. Where like, well, fuck you. Like my contract says I'm getting out on this day, so like that's when I'm getting out. And it was a very similar thing. Like I lost a school because of it, because they didn't want to send me to a school. When it came time to like, you know, actually separate for us, you know, so you have the Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal, which most people when they separate get one, just like an end of tour award sort of thing. And I remember my department head, who was an 03, he was like, no, I don't believe in E5 and below getting Navy and Marine Corps achievement medals, which was bullshit because somebody just got one. And I was like, okay, whatever. Like I'll fucking pass on the award. Like, you know, doesn't matter. Yeah. But yeah, things like that.
Yeah. And I had the same thing. And I also had like a personal like spite with the retention NCO of our unit. Cause
it doesn't help.
Cause I was like very like, I wasn't aggressive like with the enemy. I mean, I was like, but like not that killer instinct, but I was like very protective of my guys. And so we had this retention NCO for the battalion, who like completely screwed one of our soldiers because, like I'm sure you guys had like the people that were like career E4s, where it's like you're never gonna get to E5. Like you just
we actually had one in my division. He got fucked. We had a chief that which was the RE7. He was in charge of us, and our guy went on leave. For the Navy, like you submit leave, you route it up the chain of command. It rarely ever gets approved. Like leave is like impossible to get approved. So finally he gets approved. He gets sent home on leave. So for the Navy, in order to make rank, you have to take a test, and you have to pass like with a certain score. Well, the test was during his leave. And instead of the chief like submitting paperwork for him to take the test when he got back. Our chief just didn't do that at all. And he called him on leave, and he was back in Michigan, and he was like, hey, you have to be here in an hour. You have the advancement exam. He's like, I've had this leave approved for months. And he's like, yeah, I forgot that there's an advancement exam. And then he's like, well, I can't come back from Michigan. He's like, can you just submit the paperwork? He's like, oh, I'm not submitting the paperwork. So because he missed the exam, it gave him like a 0 score, and that stays with you for like 3 evaluation cycles. So there was just no way for him to make E5.
That's insane.
Which is just like, and again, no fault of his own. He submitted leave, it got approved by the captain, and then our chief kind of fucked him. So
yeah, that sucks. That's like this situation is like there was a guy who just didn't have the leadership qualities, and like he came to us. I think at this point he had already been in for 8 years and was still a specialist.
Oh wow!
And so he's trying to re-enlist, and I'm like working in the office at this point. Like I'm doing like the training room stuff, and so he's like, I want to go to Hawaii, and I want a bonus. And he's like, okay, well I can get you Hawaii, and I can get you this like small bonus. I think it was like $6,500 or something like that. For a 4-year contract. He's like, perfect. That's what I want. And then I think he was a master sergeant, so he was an E8.
Oh shit.
He goes and says, he's like, or you could enlist for 3 years. And he's like, why would I do that? He's like, well, he's like, you know, you're coming up on your 10th year of being a specialist. Like, they're going to look at you and be like, wow, this guy's so high speed, and they're going to promote you like the second you get to Hawaii. And I'm like, no, they're not. Like, they're going to be like, what is wrong with this guy? And he's like, but then, like, if he's like, basically, like, if you get promoted in Hawaii, then you'll have a bigger bonus when you re-enlist there. And I'm like, word to this math is not checking out. Like, that's
sounds fugazi to me.
Yeah, I'm like, that's not what's going to happen, because A, like, I love you, you're not getting promoted, and B, like, bonuses are going away. Like 2 years ago, your bonus would have been like $20,000. Like, now you're like trying to get like $4,000. Like, there's not going to be a bonus by the time you like can re-enlist again. Like, those are gone. Yeah. Because this is like 2011 too.
And plus, if you re-enlist, like, I know at least for us overseas, you usually get like tax-free money, which is awesome.
Yeah, and that's what I said. So. Like, take the tax-free, like, take the guarantee. Like, you can get the money you want. You can get the duty station you want. Like, that's a win. Like,
for sure.
Take that. And this guy like just keeps like, at this point, like, it's like a game for him. And he's like, no, just like, he's like, you're gonna get promoted high speed. And so this kid goes and like signs a 3-year contract for Hawaii, like forgoes his bonus, and this is like the first year of our deployment, or the first like month of our deployment. And so then in like November, he gets the same thing, because like we're both going to be going to Hawaii. He gets the same piece of paper. It's like, hey, you have to extend your contract for a year.
Oh shit.
And he's like, no, I re-enlisted for 3 years. And they're like, yeah, but like you wasted a year of that in Afghanistan, so now you don't have enough time in Hawaii. So you have to extend your contract. He's like, well, can I do the 4-year like bonus thing like that I was going to do? And they're like, no, that's gone. So he had to like, he still did a 4-year contract, but he got like screwed out of his bonus and stuff like that. And this guy thought it was hilarious. Like the retention guy thought it was hilarious. I'm like, it's not your money.
I hate people like that.
And so I blasted him. Like, I went like to the battalion and brigade sergeant majors who like loved me, and I'm like, your retention NCO is fucking my soldiers. And like, so then after I signed my deck statement, I got like a note that said, hey, you're going to Korea courtesy of Master Sergeant McConkey.
Oh shit.
So he was like the guy that like sent me, like, because I had like orders at that point. They're like, okay, well, now that you're not doing the deck statement, you'll go to drum. And then he's like, nope, just kidding, you're going to Korea. You can do that for a year. Fuck.
So you go to Korea. What was Korea like?
Korea was probably the closest that I could imagine prison to being like.
Oh man.
Like, it was such a weird place. Like, the country is beautiful and the people are amazing, and I loved like working with like the Korean army, but everybody thinks that Korea is like, it's like the Wild West, because it's like all these like E6s and like all these people going for a year to a place where you can drink, and like they hate their wives, so they're like not bringing them and like staying long enough, so they just get to act like bachelors for like a year, and it's horrible. Like it was the only unit I've ever had like a legit bedtime, like not like a curfew, but like
Oh wow.
like there was like a couple week period where like people would be walking down the halls to make sure bedroom lights were off at 10 o'clock.
No shit.
And I'm like,
What's the reason for that?
because people kept like every base had
Getting into trouble or
yeah, and it was like bad trouble. Like it was insane. Like one guy, there was an E6 that like pulled out a machete against like a bar owner.
Wow.
Because he didn't want to like do last call.
What the
And
fuck?
then the bar owner like gangs in New York him and like was like really good at like taekwondo and like took his knife and like gutted him with it.
No shit.
Yeah,
Fuck.
The guy lived, but he like was like holding his guts in like in the ambulance. And so then because of that, like he wasn't even in our unit. They're like, okay, well you guys have lost off post privileges.
Wow.
Like bedtime is a thing. It was, and then somebody stole a car, like a police car.
Of course.
Like, and it doesn't help that like soju is like the national drink of Korea, and that stuff is the devil in a bottle.
Yeah, I know like for the Navy, anybody that gets stationed over in Japan, they all like so they shared the base with the Marines, and Marines were getting into trouble, which was causing like curfews for people on the Japanese base and stuff. So it was always like, no, you don't want to get into Japan because there's like 7 p.m. curfews and stuff. But I never heard of bedtimes before. Like that's wild.
It was nuts. Like they said that like the easiest way to make E5 in Korea is to like come in as an E7.
Oh shit.
It was
It's great.
like that when you got to leave, it was great, but we were right by the DMZ, so we could only, I think Seoul was like the furthest that we could go without having like a special pass.
No shit.
And Seoul was really fun. Like it was a cool place, but there was just it was a lot of, and also because like you can be like 19 or 18 and drink over there. So now you've got like
Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster.
like children just
Yeah.
getting like, and one guy got like so drunk that he tried to like microwave a pizza for like 17 minutes and like started his microwave on fire.
Of course.
Like it was interesting.
So do you separate from Korea?
I did.
Okay.
I got out of the army in Korea. Like that was like I did like a year and a half there because that was like what was left, and they're like, well, it doesn't make sense to send you somewhere else for 6 months.
Yeah. Okay. So when you come time to separate, what was the transition like from Korea?
So I ended up moving directly from like flying directly from Seoul to actually that's kind of funny too, is when you separate, they will only fly you as far back as where you join the military.
Correct, yeah.
So I was like trying to go to New York because that's like where my wife lived and everything like that. And they're like, we can only take you as far as Chicago. And they're like, and even that, like we're only supposed to go to Madison, but because like the price, like the flights are like pretty much the same, like you can go to Chicago, but then you have to like buy your own plane ticket from Chicago to New York.
Of course.
Yeah.
Why help you out?
I'm like, we're exactly halfway around the world. Like, just go the other way, and then I can go to New York.
Well, everybody knows the Earth is flat, so you can't do that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But that was it was a weird transition because like Seoul is like a really big city. There's like 26 million people, I think, in Seoul. And there's only 8 million in New York City.
Wow, that's wild by comparison.
Yeah, it's like Seoul's like way more spread out, but it's very like, so I think actually that helped quite a bit because it was like a lot of the things I was still used to. Like I got really good at like the subway from like being in Korea.
Okay.
So there were like some things like that were good, but it was a weird couple months. Like I had like some like I started school I think like a month or two after I got out, which helped a lot to like have some kind of routine.
Yep.
But yeah, I started noticing like pretty intense like mental health like drop offs and stuff like that, where it was like I couldn't tell if I was just like enjoying being lazy or like depressed.
Yeah, I know that feeling all too well. Did you know what you wanted to do when you were getting out? Like, obviously, you said you went back to school. Did you just go to school just to get school started, or did you have an idea of what you wanted to do at that point? Or
So I had a few ideas. Like I ended up going to a criminal justice school because
Okay,
at first I'm like, okay, well I can be a cop. Like that's like for the infantry, that's like really the only like transferable skill.
fair.
And a lot of people, like a lot of like police forces, don't want like military police. They want like infantry people because like the training is like closer.
Interesting.
And apparently, like the reason is like for the military police, like they've learned a bunch of habits of like how to do things, and like the police forces would rather like not have to unlearn like the quote unquote bad habits that they have.
Got it. Makes sense.
And so I started for criminal justice. I'm like, oh, I'll just be a cop. Like, and I started like the hiring process for the NYPD,
Yeah.
and then eventually it was like, this is all the things about the Army that I didn't like.
Yeah.
So I ended up taking like some computer science classes and like kind of fell in love with that, and then got into cybersecurity.
Awesome. So when you're going to school for cybersecurity and stuff, are you also thinking about doing like stand-up comedy and stuff too, or?
Yeah. I started like as I started doing like civilian stand-up comedy when I was in Kentucky.
Okay.
At Fort Knox, because like Louisville is like 45 minutes away, so there was like a club that I could like go to, and I got like passed, so I was like hosting for like some big name comedians and stuff like that, which was cool. And then like as soon as I was like getting traction in the comedy world, then they're like, you're going to Korea. And so then like from there, like I was like writing a lot, and I found like a group of like Australians and Canadians that do stand-up comedy in Korea, so I like did it with them, but it was like just kind of like to keep the rust off. And then when I came to
Sure.
New York, I basically had to start over. Like they didn't care that I like hosted at like the Improv in Louisville. They're like, well, cool, like you're here now, and you have to start paying for open mics, and then kind of go from there. And then it's been going well. Like it's a year ago last week, like March 6th, I got to headline my first New York City comedy club.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was fun. And then like the week after, they shut down comedy
Everything.
forever. And I'm like, this might be my fault.
So, as far as comedy goes, who would you say are like your biggest influences, like, or who are your favorite like comedians?
Oh, that's a good question. I've been loving Nate Bargatze lately.
Okay.
He's just like super funny. John Mulaney
John Mulaney's great.
is incredible. There's a lot of amazing New York City comics. Like Jay Jordan is like one of the best performative comics I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And just crazy funny, super nice guy. Yeah, there's a bunch. Like I like it all, honestly.
Yeah. Now, what would you say would be like? What's your kind of short-term goal with comedy, and what do you think is like your long-term goal? Like, is your goal to like get your first special? Is it to like host SNL? Like, what is your like ultimate thing?
Oh, that's a great question. I think my short term goal, and something I'm working on this year, and might have been able to do last year if 2020 didn't happen. I'm working on a special.
Awesome.
So that'll be really cool because I want it to be kind of like half, like 3/4 comedy special, but then also like it's gonna deal with like my struggles with like PTSD and like what I did to like go get help and like cope with it. And I actually want like some like scenes cut in from like me in like group therapy with like other veterans talking about like how they had to adjust.
Yeah.
To like hopefully destigmatize it and stuff like that a little bit, and get people to kind of be like, okay, like this is like
awesome.
a normal thing. So that's like my immediate goal. And I don't know, like I really want to do Bob and Tom radio. Like that's been like a goal since I was a kid. I don't know if I like need to do like Saturday Night Live, but I would like at some point to like be able to like do shows like across the country or something like that. Like
That would be awesome.
or at least to be able to.
Yeah, no, for sure. And hopefully when things open back up, that's actually like a possibility.
Yeah, I'm hoping so, because like I hit all of the goals that I wanted to do last year, which was like cool. I got past it, like all the clubs I wanted to get past at. So when they open back up, I should be okay. But
Yeah, I hope things do too. I know me and my wife, we had tickets to like a few comedy shows, and then COVID happened, and then obviously that didn't happen.
yeah, that's always,
which is a bummer. But so talk to me a little bit about how the listeners to my show can find you, whether comedy, social media, like all that type of stuff.
yeah, definitely. So you can find me on Twitter at It's Peter J.
Okay.
You can find me on YouTube at Pete Stegemeyer. I've got a couple like of my like better sets and stuff like that on there, and that's going to be part of where I release my special as well.
Okay.
And then if you're into like heists and true crime and stuff like that without the murder, I host a podcast called I Can Steal That about like heists and scams and cons. So
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, it's pretty fun.
All right. So, and I'll plug all that stuff in the description for the show as well, so everybody can go check it out.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Before we sign off, I want to know, talk about like your best comedy experience and like your worst comedy experience so far.
Okay, so my best one is probably like the first person that I ever got to open for, that I got like paid to open for, was Pablo Francisco.
Oh, nice.
Like growing up, like his special was like one of the best Comedy Central specials I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And so like getting to hang out with him for like a whole weekend was just the coolest. And like I don't know if anything's ever gonna like beat that. My worst comedy experience, there were definitely some shows that I did like in Afghanistan where like I sucked because I was getting started, and like there were a couple times where like people like went on patrol early instead of like sticking around for the whole thing, like, and they're just like, I'm like, oh, like you chose like the worst human experience over hearing my jokes, so that's cool.
That's okay. Yeah, that's probably not a good feeling.
But it was fine, like, but it made me better.
Yeah,
for sure. And
well,
then
that's good to hear. Yeah, I know. I like to listen to what is it? Bill Burr. He has like a podcast as well, and he always talks about like his worst bombing experiences and like how like horrible they are. So.
There's definitely been some bad ones.
Yeah. All right. Well, I hope that like you have all the success in the world. I'm glad that like you're getting success with this, and I'll plug everything for my listeners to check it out. I'll check it out as well. And it was awesome to have you on the show, man.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was. All right. So we'll talk to you guys next time on Once Upon a Boot.